underneath the buttonhole dial, we've got a dial here which has two functions. There are two drawings, two diagrams. The first one that I'd like to draw your attention to is this one here, where you can see it's a small dotted line that leads to a large dotted line. That means we're talking about stitch length. And that is what these numbers also represent. It's the length of stitch that you need to do. To be able to change those, you need to gently wind the dial up and down from 0, where there's no length, to 5, where there's the longest length stitch. Okay, now when we're doing straight stitch, we simply have it on 3. And the numbers represent millimetres. So if you do a stitch that's marked 3, you'll be doing a stitch that's 3 millimetres long. So you always need to check that before you start sewing, that you've got it in the right position. The second function of this dial refers to this diagram up here, and you'll see it looks like a U with an arrow on it. What it means is you can sew backwards. And we need to do that at the start and finish of every seam to knot off the thread so our stitching doesn't come undone. And what you need to do to be able to sew backwards is you lift this lever right up to the top as far as it'll go, and for the length of time that you hold it there, you will sew backwards. It's generally only for 3 or 4 stitches. It should only be 3 or 4 stitches, and then you gently release it again and you'll sew forwards again. Okay. On the 1008 model, which this is, you have 2 dials here at the bottom. On the 1006, it's only 1 dial. So 1008, we see here that we have a dial with a marker that shows a green line and also shows a red line here. And what that does is that corresponds to the stitch selector at the top. Notice the green line and the red line. Well, depending on the setting that you have set down here, they're the stitches that you'll be doing. Okay, we want them on green for year 7. Okay, we don't use the red setting for year 7. So that's just the 1008 model. What the 1006 model has, and also the 1008, is this dial here. And you'll see that there's a little diagram here that looks like a straight stitch and a zigzag, and a little diagram on this side which looks like a piece of mesh or a grid. We can move that dial gently from side to side. What we want to be able to sew a straight stitch and a zigzag, we need to have it set on this dial over here. Because what this side does is if we turn that dial, it actually stops the feed dog from going up and down, which means your fabric won't feed through the sewing machine and you'll just be stitching on top of it, on top of yourself. Just one stitch on top of the other. And that's only used by senior students, so you don't need to worry about that at this point in time. So always make sure that this dial on the 1006 and the 1008 is lined up with the straight stitch and the zigzag.